Welcome to the Animal Training Academy podcast show. I'm your host, Ryan Cartlidge, and I'm passionate about helping you master your animal training skills using the most positive and least intrusive approaches. Here at ATA, we understand that navigating the vast challenges you encounter in training requires a comprehensive base of knowledge and experience. It's common to face obstacles and rough patches on your journey that can leave you feeling overwhelmed and stressed. Therefore, since 2015, we've been on a mission to empower animal training geeks worldwide. We've aided thousands in developing their skills, expanding their knowledge, boosting their confidence, and maximizing their positive impact on all the animal and human learners they work with. We are excited to do the same for you. Simply visit www.atamember.com, join our vibrant community, and geek out with us. And of course, in the meantime, enjoy this free podcast episode as we explore new ways to help you supercharge your training skills, grow your knowledge, and build your confidence, so that you can craft a life that positively impacts every learner you encounter. We will start today's episode where I'll be talking to one Chirag Patel. Chirag is an internationally renowned behaviour and training consultant who began his career in 2004 helping dogs and their people. Today, he works with a range of species, both domestic and exotic, in homes, zoos, labs, and organisations across the globe. His clients have included Guide Dogs UK, the Police, Dogs Trust, BC, SPCA, Kong, and many more. Based in the UK, Chirag has taught workshops and seminars across Europe, North America, Australia, Mexico, and the Middle East. He holds a BSc with honours in veterinary sciences and a PG cert in clinical animal behaviour, along with multiple advanced credentials. A passionate advocate for ethical, science-based behaviour change, Chirag empowers both animals and humans through low-stress cooperative care techniques. He's been featured on BBC's Nightmare Pets SOS and Cats and Dogs at War. And his YouTube channel has reached over 1 million views, offering free education to professionals and pet guardians alike. So without further ado, it is my very great pleasure to welcome Chirag Patel back to the ATA podcast show today, who's patiently waiting by on the other side of the planet. Chirag, thank you so much for taking the time to come and hang out with us again at Animal Training Academy.
Hi, Ryan. Thank you very much. I am so happy to be back. It's such a happy place, and our previous experiences have been, I think, amazing. I love them, and they brought joy. So I'm really looking forward to today's experience.
I say again because, Chirag, you were on, God, I don't know, episode like 20 or 30 or something. We're up to 260, 270 now. And did you know that your episode is the most downloaded episode? I think it might be up to about 20,000 or something downloads, something ridiculous. I can double check after. But I think it's heavily influenced by its title, which has your name in it. For one, you're very widely recognised and appreciated. And two, it has the bucket game in the title, which I think has potentially influence. I don't have any data on this, so it's just a hypothesis. It's success. Is that when you look at your YouTube downloads, and maybe you haven't done this, is like the bucket game one of the most viewed?
Yeah, so I'd like to think it's me. No, I'm joking. It's my environment.
Totally you.
It's just me, no. And yes, it's definitely, I think, the bucket game on YouTube. I think the muzzle video, the drop, and the bucket game counting game are the top ranking videos. And because I haven't actually put too much stuff out there about the bucket game, more than the little snippets, I think the search engine, Google search for bucket game is searched widely. But I think if I added more videos, then probably it would be one of the higher ranking videos.
And I'm assuming, so tell me if I'm wrong, that when you created the bucket game, you weren't like, I'm going to create something that's really sticky and is going to get a high search result. It was just random. I mean, there was a bucket and it was a game, so you called it the bucket game. And it just kind of, it stuck. Would that be
Well, yeah,
correct?
it's actually a funny story with so I think there's a like number of different environmental influences that were coming together and evoking like my behaviors of training in certain ways. And one of those, I just heard Susan Friedman speak, and she'd kind of turned my world upside down in terms of, oh my God, I thought I knew this stuff. And I'd heard talk about empowerment. And I left, I remember leaving going, oh, how can I design protocols or change protocols that I teach already to include some of this empowerment? And one of the things I was doing a nail clip with Kane, one of my previous German Shepherds, and I remember going, well, is this food? And I put the food in front because he's lying down. The food's in front means he's not watching me when I turn around to do his back feet and move around his body. He's kind of focused towards the food. And then I was like, oh, I can make this contingent. So if he looks at the food, I go to touch. If he turns away, I stop touching. And so those thoughts came to me, and I started to kind of use that as a protocol. And I was teaching for a workshop for Sarah Fisher at Tilly Farm. And Sarah Fisher is a beautiful, amazing human. She goes, oh yeah, the other part of the story was I'd taught a workshop in LA and I'd gone to Target. And in Target, they have the area where it's like a supermarket, superstore. They have like the shelf with the deals. And as I had walked in, there were these little buckets. And I was like, oh, I need something for the puppy workshop for our students to practice. And because I used to use like food bowls or little pots. And so I got these little buckets. And then whenever I was playing the game or teaching this, I was using these buckets. And so hence it started to become known. Like Sarah Fisher's like, what's that thing, Chirag, that we did the other day in the workshop? The bucket game. And that's how the name came about, was the bucket game. So I credit Sarah Fisher for the name, and my visit to LA for the buckets and Target, and Susan Friedman for helping inspire my thinking of or change my thinking behavior and my more outside behavior and how I was working with my dog. So yeah, all of those random variables coming together.
I think I remember learning about empowerment from Susan, and I think it was was it in LLA you learned that, or was it like in a conference talk or?
No, actually, it was a conference talk, and it was, I think, IAABC was the first time I heard Susan, and in the States, maybe in Boston or somewhere like that. And again, I have to thank a trainer in the UK called Nina Bondarenko, who's a legend all by herself. I don't know if she's been on the podcast with you. Definitely should. I highly recommend it. Nina is amazing, and has a fascinating history. And she's a pioneer as well in terms of, I think, like just before a lot of like the positive shoots and stuff was happening, she was breeding Rottweilers and training them, focusing on more of a positive reinforcement approach. But I thank her, and I'm grateful for her. For I remember writing to her 21 years ago and saying, "Oh, can I come and I read some of your articles in Kay Lawrence's." And again, so credit to Kay Lawrence. There's so much gratitude here because Kay Lawrence used to have a magazine, a Clicker magazine. And I remember reading some of the articles in there, and Nina Bondarenko had written some of those. And I used to be like thinking about the dominant side of things, and dogs were also partly the German Shepherd. That's like the sexy side was the Schutzhund stuff. And so I was so fascinated. And I remember reading Nina Bondarenko's articles about using Clicker for that. And so I met Nina, and then Nina recommended that I join and go to a conference that she's going to, IAABC in the States. Met Susan or heard Susan. And so, yeah, all these different environmental influences that I am grateful for that has shaped a history that allowed me to engage in the behaviors I do.
Yeah, I remember learning about the babies who move their head in a certain way to trigger the movement of a mobile above their head, and how those individual babies in the study that Susan shared who had increased head movement had increased coo sounds and gar sounds and sounds that one might attribute to a happy internal state within that baby. That's Was that what Susan talked about? That's like my anchor
Yes,
point. Was it exactly that?
100%. That I
No
remember her
way.
telling that example, and I love that. Like I remember I used to share it so much when I heard it. I was telling everyone about it,
Mm.
and it was just yeah. I that was actually one of the big points of like yeah, that really helped as well.
And then you learned about empowerment through Susan. You brought these little buckets from the sales table at a big store. I think was it Target, one of the big stores in
Yeah,
the US.
Target.
And then you started to look for ideas about how you could implement that. It made me curious when you were saying that. Like, how do you stay innovative, and how do you and there's a reason I'm asking this question because I think as careers go on and you learn protocols or procedures that work for you, but potentially if you paused and reflected, you might see that you're skipping some of the lower, to reference Susan's work, some of the lower levels of the humane hierarchy, and reaching for procedures that are a little bit more invasive. And I think it takes something, which is what I'm asking you about, something to be consistently aware of individualism, and being innovative and hearing what others are doing and then practically applying that, uh, because your learning history would arguably push against that somewhat. How do you stay innovative?
Oh, that's such a great question. One answer I think I could, well, one thing I have observed is going through various exercises or how would I teach certain things from a behavior analytic perspective and a contingency analysis has hugely really helped in terms of when I started sitting down and going, so when I started to learn about ABA and learn about, it's not just about learning theory, it's not just operant conditioning, it's a bigger field and there's so many more nuances, and that aspect of function is important, analyzing like MOs, SDs, behavior and consequences. And I started to sit down and I would remember sitting there for hours on different journeys. And I'd like, okay, how do I teach loose leash walking? How do I teach? What do I do when a dog barks? What do I do when X is happening or Y is happening? And do it for the human too, the human learner. And I would end up writing these ABCs going, oh my God, I'm confused now. And then going back. And as I started doing this, going, oh, what I was calling teaching a leave with positive reinforcement, I'm actually using a lot of extinction or setting up for extinction or using negative punishment. And oh, if I just did it this way and I put the B here and this was the A, suddenly there's a positive reinforcement contingency or there's something different. And so some of my kind of protocols or things that I use have really just come from, this is where I go back to the fundamentals for me, the principles, the functional assessments, the contingencies. And as I ask the question, what is the MO, the SD, behavior consequence? What do I want to set up for? What contingencies do I want to arrange for? And what behaviors do I want to promote? Then it comes from, I think, also all the learning history of watching other people, reading from other people, hearing them talk. These things are there. They've influenced you. They've changed you in some way when you've contacted this material, the people, the social interactions, the knowledge, and ideas appear. They come. I can't take responsibility for the ideas because they're not really like, if I didn't have the learning history and the exposure to these different environmental events, then maybe I would be doing something very different. So I think again, it goes back to, I think, something Ian Dunbar said to me early on was, see as many different trainers as possible and go work with as many different people who are different to you and don't just do what you believe in. And that will be one of the best things you can do. And I think I love that because you learn different ways to speak to people, different ways to do different exercises, analyze why does this person do this and that person does that, and then bring it back to science and work your way up. And suddenly I think that allows for so much creativity and innovation. So I actually think what some people might consider boring or, oh, it's the basics, the ABCs, I can't get anything new from that. For me, that is the thing that allows me to be innovative or creative. So I don't know if that makes sense, but I think that's a huge one for me.
Well, let's see if I'm picking up what you're putting down.
I
Firstly,
like it.
I don't know where I got that from. I remember hearing it somewhere. Um, Firstly, You reminded me of something I think Michael Shikasha shared on a podcast episode with us, where he shared like how much thought he put into his sessions he's just had on his traveling routines, and always had some. I think, and I'll have to go back and listen because I'm kind of moved out of what Michael Shikasha said, and now saying what I think Michael Shikasha would do, but that is to have some questions on board that are really empowering and growth orientated. Like, what did I do? How can I do it better? It sounds like you have the same, that when you've got some space without any needs being placed upon you from your environment, you can just attend to your own thoughts. You're exploring what you've seen and trying to filter that through what you know from the behavioral analytical lens. And that helps you be innovative.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Being critical, and not in a bad way, but just, I think, questioning, what did I do? Why did I do it? What can I learn from this? Is there something, what did I do that I'm going to do again? And why am I going to do it again? Am I doing it just because it's intuition, or in air quotes, or is there actually a reason that I'm aware of, and I can observe, and I can tact, or I can verbalize? And there are so many things that I do that maybe I can't verbalize. And why is that? Am I not aware of exactly what I'm doing, or how I'm doing it, or and can be being more aware of it allow me to be better? And also, if I believe in a scientific approach and the assumptions and behaviors of a scientist and the philosophies, one of those is to kind of ask the question why, and where's the data, and to always be critical, to allow us to keep what we're doing, keep the integrity in what we're doing. So for me, that's super important, is to ask always, what can I learn from this? What can I analyze? And even kind of, it's a bit of a sidetrack, but I think the world of social media is super interesting, and part of my journey has been social media as well. But say, for example, if someone puts a comment that I might equate as rude, or I'm going to decide it's something, well, for whatever reason, it could be aversive or rude, or a number of different labels we could put there. I might choose, actually, I'm going to delete this comment, or I might reply to it. Whatever I decide to do, that's a bit irrelevant. But one of the things often do is I will take the comment, I will write it down, and then I'll put it into bullet points, and basically go objectively, what points are there in this comment that I could evaluate? So if the person said, "Oh, you're just horrible. How can you work with marine mammals? And why can't you work with domestic animals? And why do you have to use food to motivate the animals?" Then out of those things, I will ask the questions like, "Okay, what can I take here that might just be more subjective comments that I can't really test, I can't do much with, and now I'm just going to kind of put them aside and erase them." Then I've got a bullet point of questions like, is there something else I can use other than food? Am I always using just food? Am I using animals' meals for training alone? And I just ask myself those questions, and see what answers I have. So engage in that interaction. And that, for me, I really love that, because I feel like it's an opportunity and an environmental arrangement to grow and be critical, but in a good way. And then I might say, actually, I disagree with some of these statements, but I don't need to reply back to a person. But thank you for giving me the opportunity to actually question what I do, and give me an opportunity to reflect and self-reflect. And so that, I think, again, that reflection, the analysis, asking those questions can be so helpful. And we can also start changing certain cues in the environment from more negative to more positive.
Okay, so one thing I was curious about as you were saying that, like how often would you say you do that process?
How often would I say the process of the social
Taking
media
a
comments, or
comment.
just
Yeah.
analyzing everything?
Social media comments.
Every time, I think, every time I get a
Yeah.
social media comment, I would probably, like, I don't go every day look through the comments, but I have now tried to. So I know if I read comments, then I might sit there analyzing something for 4 hours, or think about it, and not in a necessarily even a bad way, but I want to work with my new cat, or take Niska for a walk, or go learn, read a book. And so I don't want to take away for those. So now I've arranged that, okay, there's certain times where I'll go through my comments, And I will take comments that are good feedback and use those to, they function as reinforcers for wanting to make more content. And but also they also provide information to me about what is it that people um, what is it that people are picking up on in those, what comments are they making and why, and is that a way to then capture an audience or speak to an audience. And also then the more critical comments, I've seen they're there. Is this the right time? So ask myself, under this context or under the conditions of seeing critical comments, that should become a cue for, do I want to engage in them now? And I would decide, okay, no, not right now because there's other things I need to do today, but I'll put them on a list and later I can sit down and go through them. And I have a system now how to go through them. So those systems have helped make it more productive. But I would say regularly, and I'd say basically every day in my life, most of the time I'm questioning what I do, why I do it, why did I do that after I did it, or usually not, maybe sometimes not before, but you definitely afterwards. It's like, wait, how did that go? Why did that go like that? So yeah.
And is that something that you've done since a kid, or something that a behavioral analytical filter and knowledge acquisition has fostered in you?
I don't know the answer to that. I can't remember. I don't think I can accurately answer that because, yeah, I would like my generic, like the popular type wording would be I can't remember. So I'll probably just make something up as we start talking. Or the current cues will probably make me say something that might not actually be true. So I don't know, but I probably guess that definitely seeing a scientific approach and a philosophy is important for me to achieve where I want to go. And it's a model that allows me to bring change to myself, to the learners I work with, and the field at large, has definitely either boosted that or been a huge part of that. But maybe there was parts of it that I was doing early on as well. But I can't, yeah, I don't know. That's the short answer. I don't know.
Yeah, I find it interesting because I've never heard anyone share that process before. So I don't know if anyone else does that. But I do know that. Let me share an example. When we had Ava Bertelson out here, your good friend Ava Bertelson out here last
Not
year,
Samiva.
and we put a questionnaire out to our workshop attendees and said, "Who do you want to have out here?" Yours truly was represented the most in that feedback. And I attribute that to, and let me know how this lands. I attribute that to your teaching ability and your ability to convey ideas. And now I'm curious if that comes from, and I'm sure the answer is yes, but tell me if it's not, comes from, in part, the process you just described, and not necessarily just the process you just described, but the mindset behind the process you just described of being curious and always looking to grow and learn and improve. How do those words land? Improve. I don't normally use that word.
Yeah, again, I'd probably say it's hard to have the data to say that's it, but I would guess that might be part of it. Definitely, it does. Yeah, like that could be part of it, and I think I suppose the difference is, I suppose, if I look at what I'm, because I never thought, like when someone asked me to teach a workshop, it was Christian Stewart actually. I think I was one of the first people like to teach a workshop abroad, and I think I was teaching some UK workshops because of the videos that I did on social media. But I remember just being like, I don't actually know why. Like this one video, there's so many other people who could probably teach this stuff better than me, and then over the years, a kind of things have been selected to what is it that I can offer, not necessarily what can I offer, but what is it people are getting? They're getting something. I'm getting invited back and trying to observe what are those things that people are finding useful that could be different from another seminar or workshop. And I would agree. I think one of those differences is that people often comment on is how things are very individual. There's like, it's always like, we're breaking everything down, but also keeping it practical. And it's very individual. And that definitely comes from I think as I started to learn more about behavior analysis and the Susan's study of one, and the behavior analytic approach is the individual, that really opened up a whole world for me of like, wait, we're training puppy classes and saying socialization, and we kind of think we put a puppy in the socialization machine one end. If we do socialization right, it should come out as a perfect puppy on the other end. But each puppy is individual in terms of genetics, biology, and learning histories, and so that's pretty much not really possible. And how is it that sometimes we end up just going, oh, we need to do counter conditioning for that, or we have a dog who's doing this, we need to jump to this, but what happens to the individuality and how do we approach that? And I think that really has been a huge thing for me. And I think that's something that I'm really focused on, is constantly questioning what are the variables at play, what are the conditions, what are we doing, what's the data? And part of that is, it may seem a little bit different to the question you asked, but I think it kind of circles back in that from a behavior analytic approach, you're always questioning, you're always collecting data, analyzing, and observing and changing things. And that reflects back to, okay, how do I observe my own behavior or the environments that I am in, and how they influence my behavior and what was different. So yeah, I think that definitely maybe is definitely maybe that makes me laugh. That definitely maybe is an influencing variable. That probably means nothing. But...
Well, but why I'm asking these questions stems from a belief or mantra that I hold, that if you see in someone else some traits that you value and would find valuable to grow within yourself in that space, then learning about why that person behaves the way they do, what their processes are. I mean, imagine if everyone tomorrow just started taking aversive comments and doing your process. Like, how it would change the world. And so I'm asking these questions to try to like understand how you operate as an operator, to see what myself and the listeners can take away to model some of the things that I think have made you really successful. Give me a sec, because I had a thought that's, oh yes, about the individual thing, right? Like, so how, like I glad you brought that up, because it, I think, really stands out to me as well. And not only you, but as an individual, the learning opportunities that I find most valuable is when it is really broken down to the individual and unpacking labels and filtering things through that behavioral analytical lens. But I know that's not true for everyone, and some learners don't find as much value in that. And so I feel like this little bit of swirling thoughts in my head, disorientation and confusion, when I say, for me, like, that's needed and required, but for others it's not. And why is that?
That is a fascinating question. And I think also it's not, I think functionally there's some similarities between like your statement about if you see a trait or behaviors or repertoires from an individual, trying to study like how did that come about, so that it could be something that could be useful to me, or to you or someone else. I really like that, and that's something that I think I've engaged in too, those behaviors. But then when I was thinking about, as you're saying that, and I was thinking about it, I was also thinking, okay, so there are times where I've studied someone's behavior and their environment, and going, what are the conditions under which they were to engage in those behaviors? And can I replicate those and practice? But then I also started to go, oh yeah, it's not as simple as going, I've identified that some of these are the conditions, because also, like, if you take a certain stimulus, it could look the same, and that's going to impact my friend's behavior, or let's say your behavior. You're my friend, I count you as a friend, and my behavior may be very differently, and it could evoke different responses, different feelings, different. It could be a different antecedent, but it's the same stimulus, but the function of it is slightly different. And so part of it is identifying what is that what are the conditions, but also what are like the groups of contingencies and the previous history, and what are the MOs in place, and what's allowed for this stimulus to function in the way it does for this individual. And sometimes we may not really be able to identify that and know that. And so, I think it's almost like, why for one person will it land like this, and for another person it will land like that? I kind of sometimes, I don't go so deep in that, because I don't really, I'm not going to know that answer. And I don't know, part of me is easy or comfortable staying with the idea of a radical behaviorist approach can start to offer answers for those questions, but it's not going to tell me exactly, like, for this person it was this, without the data, and I don't have a way of collecting that data. So kind of just sticking to more the principle of, if I did want to collect the data, this is what I'd have to kind of look at, but it's not really practical to collect the data. So I'm going to accept that I won't be able to identify it, but I can understand why it would land differently for different people, although it could be similar stimulus topography wise. I don't know if that actually answers, like, is that still relevant to what we're discussing? But that's where my thought process went when you were saying that.
It made me think, and potentially just because it's what was on the tail end of your description there about acceptance. And I think that in our industry, it can be challenging to accept other perspectives or approaches. You shared something on Instagram once, and I think it's, the top 5 like impactful things that I've seen on social media shared by friends, and that was like, can you read or watch something without having any opinion as you're reading or watching it? Like, can you absorb that information without filtering it through your own experiences, part of that being judgmental reflections on differences between your values and how you do things versus what you're seeing and what you're absorbing. And then it made me think of an example the other day where I was very tired. It was a Sunday. Some days, Chirag, I just hit a wall and I'm like, my tank is empty.
Me too.
There's nothing in the tank, right? And this past Sunday was one of those days. I was like, I got nothing. Like, I just need to like do nothing today in my pajamas, which is impossible when you got kids. But it was
Or
bedtime, and I
pets.
was all pets, or just are alive. And I had just gone to bed, and I was so tired, and I put my 1-year-old to bed, Kaya, and gone into a deep sleep, like lying next to her, putting her to sleep. But then I had to get up, do things, go back to bed. Just fallen asleep. Summer walks in, my 5-year-old, crying. I don't know if she had a bad dream or something. And I was on empty. And I was like, I'm here. Summer, what do you need? Water. Okay, go get your water. She runs into her room. She gets a toilet roll, brings it to me. I'm like, why? What's a toilet roll? So I need water. I was like, go get your water. And she was very upset. I was like, just get into bed, Summer, because she comes into my room and there's a spare bed. She gets into spare bed, sleeps in the bedroom with me in another bed. And in the morning, I was like, she was really upset. Like, she needed some comforting. But I was on empty that day, and I'm human. And when she woke up, I was like, sorry, I didn't cuddle you, and gave her a big hug and said, I apologize for that. Daddy gets frustrated and tired too, but I'm sorry. But then one thing I thought about in that moment was just radical acceptance. Like, that's what it was. I was there, not only perfect, but I was there, and that's what happened. Is that I'm sharing this because I'm curious. Like, this idea of radical acceptance was shared with me, and it was like, oh, that's really interesting. And then I watch you and I hear you talk, and I'm just curious if that's of acceptance, and I feel like I've observed that in you. I feel like you're somebody that comes to mind when I think about this term radical acceptance. How does that land with you?
So, a few different things. First one, I've not heard the term radical acceptance before. So radical, yes, if from a radical behaviorist perspective, or Skinner's philosophy of behaviorism, radical, all meaning all encompassing, thoroughgoing. Like, so from that perspective, that's where kind of my learning history of radical is. Could I ask, just in terms of, like, obviously from your examples and descriptions and what you said, I could start to maybe go, oh, that fits under is that what fits under the category of the label radical in this context? But is there, like, if I was to ask you, what is radical acceptance, just because I'm interested?
Don't know, but I heard the other
Oh,
thing.
okay.
but but
Okay.
but two things. I'm going to answer it based on my understanding that I have. But I just want to express gratitude for what you just did there. I think it's so valuable to have someone to um, question and ask and check clarity on things like that, because that's so important to what we do. And I missed an opportunity there to say, when I say radical behaviorism, what I mean is, so think not radical behaviorism, radical acceptance. There's my learning history coming up. So I appreciate the opportunity to have that question. Thank you. Great. I love what you just modeled for our listeners. I think that was awesome. So just acceptance. So rather than, I wish that was different, it would be like that was what it was. Um, and then you can add some other frames there, like I was there, I care. This is why I'm thinking these things. I can't change that. That's what it was. I accept it. That's I need to articulate a better answer than that over time, because this idea is resonating with me. But for now, that's what I've got.
Yeah, and that fits to what I was gonna put. I would put under a label based on what I heard you talk about previously. And I'm also talking to, chatting with our friend. I call him Chat GPT. You call him Chatter. As a Chat GPT, what's radical acceptance? And Chat GPT is like, radical acceptance is a psychological concept that means fully and completely, so thoroughgoing, accepting reality as it is without resistance, judgment, or avoidance, even when the reality is painful, unpleasant. And then it comes from dialectic behavioral therapy, and it gives some names, and then it says a definition. Radical acceptance is letting go of fighting reality, and instead choosing to accept it deeply, wholly, and completely. And then it goes on to give more things. But yeah, I would say that is something I practice. And again, we could question, like, where did that come from? What did I read? What environments have shaped that? But yes, I would say I'm very, like, when I come across a situation, one of the big things I actually even hear, I'll hear myself thinking, or observe myself thinking, or saying out loud, is, it is what it is, or this is what it is right now. And anything else would be crazy to kind of go, I wish it was different. Like, yeah, I could wish, and it's okay to wish it's different. I accept that, but let's just go practically. What do I have in front of me? Where do I want to go? And what are the steps here, from this place to this place? And it's okay to be in this place. And like you said, it was okay to, I shouted at my dog the other day, or I said, I'll stop it, or whatever. And okay, that happened. It's okay. And the other part of that, I suppose, for me as well, being, as I start to, as a behaviorist, a radical behaviorist, and focusing on a scientific perspective, observation is so important. Like, the first level of experimentation is observation, and observation isn't judgment. It's not analysis. It's so to start with, is I've really have been practicing. If I watch a video or I read something, let me just start by observing what's there based on the history I have and the ability I have to observe based on my learning, and I can practice those skills. But so I think, yeah, often I'll start with, okay, let's just start to observe. Okay, then what correlations, or what hypotheses can I draw from the data I currently have? What's my independent and dependent variables? And I apply that to my life. So for me, essentially, the frame of radical behavior, the assumptions of radical behaviorism and Skinner's behaviorism and a scientific approach is not my job, or what it's my life. I can't see life. For me, it's Susan's example of, whether you believe in gravity or not, it exists. Taking that line of I don't know what the right words are, but the thing, taking that kind of stream of thinking to behaviorism and the scientific approach, for me, that's the way I see the world. That's the way, just not just from the morning I wake up to the time I go to bed, when I'm eating, drinking, everything I do, for me, is that frame. And I know I've dated someone previously, and I was talking to them, and I was like, they're like, but isn't the joy in sometimes just accepting, like the, and this is not quoting word for word, but isn't the joy in not analyzing, like the joy in just accepting it? And for me, and that's like, for me and my learning history, that brings me no joy. For me, the joy comes from asking questions and analyzing. And that brings a lot of joy for me. And also, rather than for me, and again, it's not right or wrong, my learning history different, everyone's individual. For me, saying I don't know and actually sitting with the answer I don't know. And if I don't have a system or actually not even a system, I do have a system. The system is the formulating hypotheses using a scientific approach and radical behaviorist approach, is if I don't know how to apply that to answer the question, or I don't have the ability to analyze the thing that's happening with this frame right now, this model, this system, I'm happy to sit there with I don't know, and I will find out another way rather than sitting there and engaging in more thinking behavior. But it could have been this, it could have been that. Why didn't this person call me back? And actually, I don't know why the person didn't call me back. And I don't have the ability to collect that data, or I do if I phone them and ask them, or even if I ask someone and they say something, doesn't mean that's what it was. That's just verbal behavior, not just that's verbal behavior. I'm not going to put a camera and watch what they were doing, what their conditions were. And so there are so many things that I would just like that I don't have the data. And for me, I suppose the reason I'm saying that is reading the definition and hearing from yourself about radical acceptance. I would say, yeah, I do practice that a lot. And I maybe have also given some explanations of why.
I remember last time we were connected on this podcast, we talked about Eckhart Tolle and the power of now. And I'm curious if, I mean, I know my wife, Sapphire, bless her, love her, is questioning sometimes of my analytical mind on all behavior and the differences in the way she views the world and how that can create friction sometimes. And I'm also remembering back to doing a panel discussion with Susan and 4 or 5 other LLA instructors. We did LLA as a community in our academy. And that was where I really, I think it was Megan, God, I can't remember Megan's name now, Sanders, who said something like, it's more, ABA is more than just like an animal training tool. It's like, it's a way you filter the world. All right. And that's the first, and that was only a couple of years ago. And I was like, oh yeah, I never really thought about that. Like, it's my whole way of thinking. Now, for me as an individual, I think it's very different than being in your brain. But for me, it's how I felt the world. So I have a question for you. And I learned from previous experiences and asked Chaz the definition of his label before I asked a question for you so I can relate to you. Would you say, and I know we're meant to talk about Nala the cat today, but here we are. Would you say that you're spiritual? Now, spiritual, as ChatGPT defines it, relates to anything related to the human spirit or soul, especially as distinct from physical material things. It often involves a sense of connection to something greater than oneself, which can include religious faith, personal growth, inner peace, or search for meaning and purpose.
I love, this is another reason I love coming back to these, to you and the podcast, is these questions are amazing. So yes and no. So the definition you gave, if I'm now going, okay, that's the definition I have in front of me. There's a lot of probably not is where I'm kind of moving the dial. If it's like a option, like you can slide it backwards and forwards to not spiritual to spiritual. I'm kind of sliding it to the not so spiritual side based on that definition. But at the same time, when you mentioned Eckhart Tolle, and I do love Eckhart Tolle's, I say love, like I've listened to his book Power of Now many times, and I will listen to it, and I find that it's an antecedent arrangement to promote and evoke behaviors that I find super useful, engaging and in contact and reinforcers, and help me hugely in many situations. But I suppose every time I hear people or see things or read things, I'm translating back to a behavior analytic framework, asking the question, how does this, like he's using these words, and I think actually a lot of, if you change the wording and you change the terminology, and like for me, that it's easy to translate sometimes, and actually it works really well. There's a lot of kind of behavior analytic assumptions, and it just transfers over really, really well for me. And he talks a lot about being spiritual and spirituality. But then, so from the definition you were giving when I was hearing it, I was like, wait, I don't actually, what is the soul and what is the spirit? And for me, that none of that is like, for everything for me is physical. I don't believe there is a non-physical entity, and meaning even if we can't like study it right now, we haven't found the technology or the tools to be able to study it in that way. But I don't believe anything is non-physical. I do believe everything is physical and on this planet. That's one of my assumptions. And yeah, so that's one of my views of the world. I'm not saying I'm right, but that's just how I approach the world. So yeah.
It's given a couple of different contexts where you could like filter that definition through. So one of them is pertaining to one's inner life values and emotional or physiological well-being. Do you feel like understanding behavior analysis has given you improved psychological well-being? I can give a definition for that if you want.
I love it. And also, it's like people on the podcast can't see the camera interaction as well. And I just love the facial expression. The times of smiles happen between both of us, as in like when either of us saying something and there's a smile on the other side. And just for me, it brings me a lot of joy as well. And I would say, yes, so I would say ABA has. And again, ABA has helped me look at, so I struggled with the discussion of emotion from which I can remember this, like that when people talked about emotions, even as a young child, I really struggled to, like if someone said emotions, like, but what is like, as in not necessarily what is that, like I would be asking it now in the same way, but I don't know, there's something that I struggled with. And when people talked about these emotions and things, it just, yeah, like for a lot of people would be like, yeah, emotions. And for me, I was like, and even to a post-grad level, I remember being at University of Lincoln. So I did the MSc program there and I didn't really complete most of the assignments. And so I got a post-grad certificate. But I was there for the whole year and attended all the classes. But there's a huge emphasis on discussion of emotion and Panksepp's model and things like that. And I remember even then, and this was like maybe 15 years ago, 15 to, I don't know, 16, 17 years ago. But so not that long ago. But I even remember sitting there in the class going, it's just like, I don't get it. Like I'm struggling, like this whole emotional aspect of it, or like the way emotion was being, and I did A-level studied psychology at A-level, like at college in the UK. And even then, when they're talking about it, just there's so many things that didn't kind of fit together. And then when I learned about behavior analysis and how behavior analysis can study, would we go to study emotions from a behavior analytic framework? For me, something just everything fit. Like it just suddenly life made sense. And so I would say 100% because, like, yeah, I have experiences, private experiences or internal experiences that I might label as frustration or anxiety or happy, sad, whatever feelings, emotions. But using the framework from a behavior analytic perspective, and it's not just one framework from a behavior analytic perspective, but using one of those frameworks to look at emotions and start like, okay, there's this observational private event. There's my verbal behavior of me tacting or saying, this is what I'm observing inside. And now that doesn't necessarily, I could say, oh, I feel sad, but it doesn't necessarily, I might not be describing what I'm feeling inside. I might be saying that because then someone asks a certain question or someone walks away from me or someone gives me a hug or something. So it could be maintained by the reinforcers, me saying that, but also, so being to analyze my internal environmental experiences from that framework has been hugely helpful to me. And I think it allows me to navigate the world in a way that I'm able to feel less anxious in context of situations or less frustrated, or I still feel lots of emotions and lots of things in lots of different contexts. But I feel like, not I feel like, I have observed that using a behavior analytic and especially a radical behavioristic framework to look at this as being huge for me. So I would say the short answer is yes, behavior analysis definitely helped me with looking at the inside.
What is it about behavior analysis that helps you, do you think? Two prompts for you. Is it the connections that it helps one form between behavior and the environment? And the second prompt, is it language and vocabulary? And then whatever
Yeah.
else.
So, and I think there's a third thing to add to that. So Skinner, I keep mentioning Skinner. So Skinner, I think is celebrated not just for his work in behavior, as a behaviorist or yeah, whatever label we want to use in that category, but as a scientist and his work in terms of studying making this field of studying behavior a science, bringing science, because like there were a lot of people studying behavior and psychology, looking at behavior, but not necessarily with the rigor of science that Skinner brought to the table. And for me, like in Science and Human Behavior in that book, it's a lot about bringing the science to studying behavior and how to look at it from that perspective. So it's not, I think that's one huge part is being a scientist and a scientist practitioner, bringing the behaviorist of a scientist to the table, using them, engaging in them, having cues in the environment that have been established that allow me to behave in those ways. So I think those philosophies and assumptions of a scientist, they're the things that are, I think, hugely impactful. And then the science of behavior change uses the fundamental principles of like studying behavior from a scientific lens, a perspective. And so I think then the idea behind the study of behavior as looking at behavior environmental relations and looking at behavior in the environment and how they're related and what can I learn from that and what can I analyze and bring, and also the idea of kind of bringing, how can I bring the inside out to study it? How can I, so rather than saying, oh, I'm frustrated, and then trying to study frustration as this non-physical thing that we can't see, and we have to go to the mind and inside the, and go into like the, maybe a psychoanalysis, some other kind of perspective, is wait, what can I actually bring from the inside to the out that I can study the what I'm describing as this frustration issue that I have or experiencing. And by doing that, I've been able to contact reinforcers that I don't think I observed that I was able to contact with the prior learning history of trying to solve my frustration by trying to understand the frustration. And so I think, yeah, just for me, it's where the answers come more easily. And like, again, part of the answers might be, I don't know, but I really, that also allows me to feel peaceful as opposed to making up some story. And then that becomes an antecedent arrangement for the story to escalate in different ways. And then we're living in like what's going to kind of call this psychic realm or world. And it's far from reality. And I think that happens a lot. And also my observations of, and it's not judgment, it's just an observation of, I like even say my mom sometimes to be like, oh, this happened and this happened, and it's like, wait, if we go back to this story and go, where's the data? There's so many assumptions that it can't be observed, and the things are being kind of not made up, not in a bad way, but there's a learning history that went with that story. And for me, it gives me a headache or kind of causes me like more anxiety going, oh my God, like this, just, I can't even listen to this because we're now at this layer up here. And in order for me to go anywhere, I need to come right from back to foundations and actually look at the real basic layers and take away, this is what we're making up. This is what we know, is what we don't know. And then building up from there. And so I think, yeah, those kinds of things have really helped.
Yeah, I ask about that. I love, well, one of the main things I love about what you just said is it allows you to be able to contact reinforcers that you weren't able to contact before, which is cool when you think about knowledge. And then my question about language was out of curiosity because of my own journey on personal development at the moment, and just realizing that. So here's an example of where I've used language in your situation with your mother. Again, no judgment. I have the same with my mum, where
And I love my mom.
I kind of love my mum. But where you get disorientated because, and I think that comes from a perception of the world clashing with your perception of the world or the way you see things, and then suddenly you question your own perception, and it becomes a little bit disorientating. And I've called that, I've given that a name, and that name is a clarity squeeze. Shit, I'm in a clarity
Oh,
squeeze. And now that's a cue to do a behavior. And
I love it.
that behavior is to just speak into my phone's voice dictation app and record what happened. And then revisit that later at a time where I can unpack it and get clarity around that situation so that I can so that if I'm in a context that shares similarities in the future, I can navigate that better. Um, that's where that question about language came from in terms of ABA. Gone off on a major tangent. I think we've been going for about an hour. I'm sorry, Chirag. I really wanted to talk about Nala the cat today, but
I
we
am
just
glad we did it. I love the fact that this is true to the conversation we're having about accepting what is and
yeah,
going this
exactly.
way rather than, and actually I think it's made for an amazing conversation because it's something that I maybe like we don't necessarily hear on a podcast or story sometimes. And just like going, I think there's so many useful things to kind of think about and study there. And so please don't apologize for me. It's amazing. And I really appreciate the opportunity to have this environment to actually engage in some of these conversations because it's not something that is an environment that's easy to find. And you're so good at the way you're asking questions and just so easy to converse with. For me, there's so many reinforcers there that my behavior contact. So I am grateful.
Well, I'm grateful too. I think I've learned a lot. I think something I'll take away today is the reflection on comments on social media that you might find aversive, and then because that is a clarity squeeze. That is your reality and some friction between that reality and somebody else's reality. And I'll do a Ryan Cartlidge modified version of that. Hey, talking about words and labels and bringing the inside out. We're going to be doing that on the 16th of July. So make sure we release this episode beforehand with the label
Hmm.
reactivity. Can you share with the listeners about this exciting event happening inside the Animal Training Academy members only area?
Yes. Super exciting. I think we've labeled it reacting to reactivity.
Mhm.
And it's looking at this concept, this idea that is often very common currently in the training world about reactivity and reactive dogs. And is it that the dogs are reactive or are they engaging in reactive behaviors? Is reactivity a thing? And is there a protocol that we need to find to address reactivity? And I'm going to try and keep it practical from the perspective of I'm going to use some videos that of dogs who maybe could be labeled fall under the label the typical label of reactive, and I'm going to show some work with these dogs in like real time unedited videos, and we're going to watch like moment to moment interactions and discuss them. And I think that will be a great vehicle, a great environmental arrangement to kind of question things like what is reactivity and the common beliefs and verbal behavior around reactivity. So I can't wait. I'm really excited.
Amazing. We can't wait either. I know that's going to be a very popular topic and event and guest speaker for our members. And if you're the listener, not already a member and interested in joining, I'll pop some links in the write up for this episode so you can come and hang out with us as well. Before we officially wrap up, Chirag, I'm going to share with the listeners where they can go online to find you. If there's any events coming up that you want to highlight for the listeners, then share what the listeners can do after listening to the show to listen to you, see you, find you again.
Sure. So at Chirag Patel Consulting, ChiragPatel Consulting, that's my Instagram handle, also YouTube username and Facebook page. And so if you go to any of those, you can find videos. I'm more active currently on Instagram, but it changes. Those are the places where you will find more up-to-date information about myself, videos that I'm releasing. I've got juicy video that's coming out maybe tomorrow or later tonight if I finish editing it. So on Instagram probably. So yeah, have a look at those areas. And also, if you haven't, we've mentioned Skinner, this dude. If you haven't heard of Skinner or you haven't seen the BF Skinner Foundation website, I would highly encourage everyone to go check it out. There's so many free resources, and there's some amazing videos and interviews and so many free things that can be useful in the learning journey and people who are interested in behavior. So please go check that out.
Amazing. We will link to all of that in the show write-ups. And one more thing, just before I forget, this conversation came about because Chirag, the awesome Sophie Bell, and I have been connecting recently to discuss Chirag's inaugural visit to the land of the long white cloud, Aotearoa, or as most of the rest of the world knows us, New Zealand. So if you are an Australasian listener, Chirag will be joining us in Wellington, New Zealand in November 2026 for a 3 or 4 day event. We're still deep in the planning phase, but you can stay up to date via a dedicated Facebook group we've created for the event, and I'll pop the link to that in the show notes as well. Well, Chirag, this has been a ton of fun. We very much appreciate you, everything you're doing with your life, changing the world, one animal, one human learner at a time. And thank you for coming and hanging out with us at Animal Training Academy.
And thank you for being such an inspiration. The stuff you're doing with ATA and just your behaviors are super inspiring, genuinely for me as well. So thank you so much.
And thank you so much for listening as well. This is your host, Ryan Cartlidge, signing off from this episode of the Animal Training Academy podcast show. We hope today's conversation inspired you and equipped you with new tools for your trainer's toolbox. Remember, every challenge in training is an opportunity to learn and sharpen your animal training geekery. Embrace the rough patches, learn from them, and keep improving. And don't forget, the path to growing your skills and expanding your knowledge continues beyond this episode. Visit www.atamember.com to join our supportive membership, where you will find a community of trainers just like you. Together, we're making a huge positive difference in the lives of animal and human learners worldwide. Until next time, keep honing your skills, stay awesome, and remember, every interaction with an animal or human learner is your opportunity to create ripples. We're here cheering you on every step of the way. See you at the next episode.